Alright guys, so I'm here with an update video on the Chimera5 and this 18650 battery. It's the one from iFlight. It's the 4S 18650 3000 milliamp hour with the Sony VTC6 cells. So I purposefully left this testing out of that original video because I knew that it would delay that video by a couple of weeks, and some of you guys wanted that information on just not the long, I guess the longest possible flight. So I left that out in that original video. But if you want to see that original video, that's kind of like more acro flying on this 5-inch. It's going to be linked down in the video description. And if you're just looking for something a little bit more fun in a lightweight 5-inch, not necessarily under 250 grams because it isn't, and can carry a naked GoPro as you can see here, then check out that video. But if you were waiting for the information on how long it could fly for on this 18650 pack, well, here's the information. So in the product page from the iFlight website, they claim flight time of 20 to 25 minutes. And I would say that's fairly accurate. And I would say the range is actually going to be even wider than that. It's going to be probably as little as 15 minutes and as perhaps as long as 30 minutes. And it's really going to depend on your flying conditions. So when I was doing the test on a very windy day, basically pretty bad, like 30-mile-an-hour winds, I was getting probably 15, maybe a little bit more than 15 minutes of flight on this pack. And on a calm day, good conditions, you can probably push it to almost 30 minutes on this pack. Also, 30 minutes is kind of with a grain of salt as well, because you're going to have to push the quad to the point where it might even just be falling out of the sky. And I did not actually want to do that. So one of the things you got to do is, if you are going to be flying on these 18650 cells, you were going to have to adjust the battery voltage settings in Betaflight. And so I changed I changed the minimum voltage to 2.6 and the warning voltage to 2.7. You could probably go lower. I think these can go to 2.5. The 3000 milliamp hour rating for the amount of energy in here is, I think, all the way down to 2.5 volts, perhaps even lower. I didn't go all the way to the point where it just fell out of the skies. I didn't really feel comfortable flying like that. And I think that if I were to use something like this on, in like a real flight on my own, I wouldn't do that. So obviously you can push it to that point if you want and get maybe an extra 2-3 minutes, but I felt like 2.6 is probably the lowest I would want to go. Now what's interesting is, as you know, there's a lot of voltage sag on these packs. So as soon as you take off, you immediately drop about 0.3 to 0.4 of a volt. And that's just the nature of these lithium-ion cells. That's pretty normal. So when I was getting down in the 2.6 volt range, and obviously the buzzer's beeping at me like crazy, I went ahead and landed at 2.6 volts. And when this battery recovered, so obviously with no load on it, it'll recover to a certain voltage. You've recovered up to 3.1 volts. So that's pretty significant. That means there's still energy in here in this pack, even after a 30-minute flight. So you could definitely go longer, but I think that if you're risking it, you can probably get another 3 minutes and it'll just fall out of the sky. I'm not sure if you want to do that. It's up to you. It's your choice. But at 3.1 volts, given the fact that these cells can go down to 2.5 volts, there's definitely energy left in the pack. So again, it's your choice, but I would say if you want to play it safe, given depending on your conditions and when you think that basically your pack is going to die on you, I would definitely listen to the voltage setting in Betaflight, and I'd probably set to 2.6 or 2.7, knowing that you're going to have some sort of voltage sag at the very end, and be prepared to bring it in after it hits about 3 volts. That's what I would do. From 4.2 volts to 3 volts, you're going to get about, under ideal conditions, probably 15 to 20 minutes. And then I would start looking at thinking about coming back in at about 3 volts and not really push it too much beyond that. Below 3 volts, you don't have a lot of power at your disposal. Like, you can't really push the throttle too much, and it's very unresponsive. So it's, in my opinion, not that useful to fly below 3 volts anyway. And so, given the fact that they're rating this at 3,000 milliamps to 2.5 volts, it's really more like 2,400 milliamps of actual usable battery voltage on something like this. Yeah, you can just kind of really like limp along at the very end if you need to, but you're not going to have any reserve power for any sort of, like, if you need make any like corrections or something like that, or if, for example, if you were flying upwind against the wind coming back, you're going to be lacking a lot of power at the very end of this battery. So those are a lot of things you want to keep in mind. Not just raw flight time, but also you got to keep in mind the flying conditions that you're in and the wind. The wind's going to play a big role. Definitely don't fly downwind, and then on your way back when your battery voltage is really weak, fly upwind, because that you're not going to have the power to make it. And at the same time, when you're flying against the wind, there's more current draw on the battery, and there's even more sag. So I'm thinking that at some point you're just going to fall out of the sky if you aren't really careful about what you're doing. So be careful of what you're doing when you're using these kind of packs when you're going for those super long flights. All right, so now you guys want to know how much this weighs. With the 18658, 467 grams. Put a naked GoPro on here, it's going to add another 30 grams. So if you're wondering what that is, it's about 500. And this particular pack here is about 200 grams. So I know that some people are going to ask, how's this pack compared to the other ones that use the same Sony cells, the VTC6 cells? Pretty much it's identical. There's slight variations in the battery lead here, which isn't going to make that much a difference that I could notice. But yeah, there's other manufacturers like Owline, I think FRC, Flywoo, they all make their own packs from these same cells. So yeah, since they're the same cells, assuming that they're all assembled fairly similarly, which seems like it's the case, you would expect the performance to be pretty similar, and I found that to be the case because I did previous testing on the other brands, and I found the voltage sag, the power output, also the flight time to be pretty similar to this one. So if you're wondering, is one brand better than the other, I would have to say no. If you disagree, let me know down in the comments below if you have additional testing that can prove that to be different, but I haven't seen anything that can show there's any major differences between the different brands because they're all using the same Sony cells. Alright, so the last thing was people wanted me to make a video on how to set up the GPS on here because it isn't out of the factory. It's like partially set up, which is kind of par for the course for a lot of these manufacturers. They do have instructions on the product page on how to set up a GPS, so I would recommend just going with that. It's fairly straightforward. They show you all the settings, all the settings you have to make, all the settings changes you have to make in Betaflight. Also, I did make another video on how to do basic GPS setup on a different quad. It wasn't this one. I think it was the Sector 5 from HGLRC. It's going to be pretty much the same depending on which quad you're using. So if you want to check out that video, I'll link that one down in the video description as well. It's going to be fairly simple. You can just apply basically the same principles to this one, and it'll get you working. Okay, so that's going to do it for this one. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.